Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Big Blonde and Beautiful, the podcast. If you're new here, my name's Kara Howie, and each week I pick a piece of media that has fat representation in it, and I talk about whether or not I think it's positive or negative. This week is our Halloween episode, and we're going to be talking about the movie Piggy, and I have my longtime twin here, Lauren McCool.
You're right.
So thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
we.
Yeah. Everyone was like, "Are you her older sister?" And I was just like, "Yes, no,
Yes.
I'm gonna start saying yes now."
Yeah, I recently, my mom got like a thing removed a few months ago, and the nurse was like, "You look like someone I know." And I was like, "Oh, well, I have a twin." And she was like, "Do you really?" I said, "No, no, no. We just get compared all the time." She's
Yeah.
like, "What's her name?" I said,
It was a lot.
"Yes." I said, "Lauren McCool." She goes, "That's the one." I was like, "Yep." So
Weird. I
we
wonder who
still
it was.
get compared. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
So I am 33. I'm getting old. I'm married. Me and my husband brought to celebrate our 5th year wedding anniversary, and I have 2 kids. But yeah, I've always been a horror junkie, like since as far back as I can remember, and I've always been fat for as long as I can remember. So yeah, that's why I was always kind of like, I've been loving your blog, by the way, like just like to hear about like the different representation of different movies that I haven't even seen yet. So it's been kind of fun.
I'm not a horror movie girl at all. Probably my least favorite genre. But you gotta branch out. That's why you're here. So you can talk about it.
Great.
But
Hopefully I'll do it justice.
so you mentioned that you've always been fat. How, because in this movie, there's obviously a lot of bullying, especially in the beginning. Was that like a big thing that you had to deal with growing up, or?
I feel like I'm pretty lucky because even with being a bigger kid, like I'm sure people were talking about me behind my back, but I never really had like a bully or any group of like mean kids or anything like that. I look back and I grew up in like a really small town too. But I think because we had like maybe 20 kids in our class, and I think because it was so small, like everyone just kind of looked out for each other. But yeah, I mean, I've always been, I consider myself pretty lucky to have never really had that like intense bullying experience that I feel like is more common now, especially with like social media and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
I grew up in the MySpace era, so we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have Facebook yet, So I think that helps a little bit.
I grew up in a similar like environment. Obviously, I went to Oakwood. My graduating class was 68 people, so it was very small. But I actually had a lot of bullying in grade school. Was when I got bullied the most. I know, which is crazy. I'm like, grade schoolers can be mean.
Yeah,
they are. Working with kids, they can be mean. They can be very nice, very funny, but they can be very mean. But as I got older, I think what happened with you, with like people might have been talking about me, but it was behind my back, so I didn't know about it. So if I didn't know about it, I didn't care. So
yeah, that's something I feel like like people are always gonna talk. You know what I mean? So as long as it's behind my back, I guess I don't really care. But
yeah, and I'm also learning like I'm such a people pleaser, but I'm working on, as long as I'm doing what I think is right and what I want to do, and it's not hurting anyone, then we're good. Like I said, today we're doing the movie Piggy. For those of you who haven't watched it, it's currently on Hulu. It is in Spanish. I prefer to watch it in like Spanish and then just read the subtitles, but there is an English dub version, so you can watch that if you want. But in case you're like me and you don't like horror or you just don't have the time, I'm gonna read a little synopsis. And so before we get started, all right. So the synopsis for Piggy is: not everyone loves summertime. For Sarah, it just means dealing with a constant barrage of mockery, judgment, and abuse from the other girls in her village. But today is different. A mysterious unknown man arrives in the village and kidnaps her tormentors. Someone has finally stood up for her. Sarah sees it all: the blood, the mud, the night, and the van in which he has taken them. And the unknown man has seen her. A wordless pact that neither will betray. She's an accomplice now. A series of crimes rocks the village, and an investigation soon begins.
A little intense.
Yeah, because I watched definitely the first like 20, or like more than that, but like first 20 I was like zeroed in on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the bullying in the beginning is bad.
It's intense. You get to the part with the pool with the net.
Yeah. I was like, you're trying to drown her.
Like they're
What?
literally trying to unalive her. Like
Yeah, I think they might have been.
it's
So,
wild, and that's why I wonder too. Like, because it is in Spanish. Like, I wonder too. Like, I've been able to go overseas a few times, and I don't know. It really just depends on the country. I feel like how they view fat people. That's probably a topic for a whole nother day. But yeah, I feel like especially if she's in like a small town too. Anything that's different, is not
yeah,
good.
yeah.
So,
Have you been to any like Spanish speaking countries?
I've been to the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And I didn't really have a problem there. Where I really had strange occurrences was like Southeast Asia, like
Okay.
Cambodia. I mean, just because like that's really not normal for their
Hmm.
culture to have like bigger people. So I definitely felt like I was being stared at a lot. Which was fine. I mean, you're gonna get used to it after a while. And I didn't want to let that like ruin, you know,
Yeah, your
being
trip.
out of the world. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've never been out of the country, unfortunately. I hope to someday very soon. I want to go to Greece really bad.
Me
That's
too. I haven't been
where I
there.
know the cultural, and then also her whole family is bigger.
I'm like, see, sometimes it's just in your gene pool, and that's okay.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite moments from this movie?
So I honestly feel like it's almost one of those movies where it's just like, I don't know, I had to like put myself in like a teenage mindset as well. Because like her friends get kidnapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it was me and I saw something like that, like even if it was people who were like being mean to me, I'd probably go to the police.
Yeah, I
But
would definitely be like, Mom,
yeah.
I don't know what to do.
But honestly, I could like see it from her perspective because she sees this guy that is showing her attention almost. And if she's never
Hmm.
done that before, you
And
know,
positive attention, like he's
yeah.
not being mean. Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of like an interesting part of the movie. Like, I don't know. Because I feel like, in my own experience, like, I didn't really date until, gosh, probably like in my 20s.
Hmm.
And so, like the first guy who ever like showed attention, a million red flags, I was like, oh, yay. Like, acting like an idiot. When really it was just like a horrible situation.
Yeah.
I'm like, I could kind of see myself, in her that way. But I also really like there's a scene and it's like they take her clothes, from the pool, and
Yeah.
she's like walking down the street in a bikini, and I think to me that's almost like an empowering scene because it's like you don't really see that too often in
Hmm.
movies.
No.
Um, and so I thought that was kind of neat too, and that's very
Yeah,
much like normal with like horror like slasher movies. Like the main girl is like usually half naked half the movie, so I just like the
didn't know that.
yeah.
I knew
I
that
like
like
that they
there's
kept it the same kind of standard.
gotcha. I knew like I've heard of the final girl, and I know it's usually like the virgin, the pure
Well,
one,
yeah,
like
sometimes, yeah.
so but yeah. But I was also very surprised to see her in a bikini. When I first saw her, I was like, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then of course all that happened, and I was like, okay. I'm trying to think, because like I'm like favorite parts of the horror movie.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like it's hard to say like a favorite part because it's like horror is meant, I feel like, to make you feel uncomfortable
Uncomfortable? Yeah.
and question things, and I don't know, to me that's why I like a good horror movie.
Mhm.
Especially because like the whole movie it's kind of like, well, is she or isn't she going to, help them? Um so honestly there's some parts I was like maybe she could just never try to help them. And I mean, I guess it's good. I don't want to give it away, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
mean, I figure if you're watching this, like, we do spoilers here. Like,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
pause and go watch it if you don't want it to be spoiled.
yeah.
So,
But what told me is there's a part when she's at the end and like helping these girls, and one of them, while she's in the process of helping them, like calls her like a stupid idiot or something like that. And I'm like,
yeah.
are you in a position to?
I would have been like, okay, you can stay here.
Yeah,
I'll go be a stupid idiot over here then.
yeah.
Ugh,
Wow.
well,
But it's
yeah.
also nice too, like, and I know you just talked about this on one of your many podcast episodes about like the fat villain trope. For me,
Hmm.
like it was just nice to see a horror movie where the fat girl wasn't the villain, Like
Yeah.
that's kind of rare for.
I was gonna
Like,
say, are there a lot of horror movies where the fat person's the villain?
I mean, maybe not a lot, but it's common, especially I feel like for like male characters. The one I can think of off the top of my head is I don't know if you've ever seen Misery with Kathy
Uh,
Bates.
no.
She's like the villain in that, and she's always been a fat actress, and that's a
I
really
feel
good.
like she plays some like
She has some killer roles.
horrible people, like especially for American Horror Story. I have seen some American Horror Story.
Like had really good presentation as well, because he also had oh, what's her name? I can't think of her name. She's the girl who played Precious.
Her name is, I don't want to butcher it.
The actor is beautiful, so
Yeah.
but yeah, so that was kind of cool to see that they didn't just pick stereotypical like white teenage girls.
Yes. I also, something about this movie, having started posting more online, I get a lot of hate comments. Sometimes I think of things, but I'm like, no, I don't want to give them the attention that I feel like they're craving. I
Yeah,
feel like why a lot of people comment horrible things is they want to get a reaction. And
yeah,
so my reaction is I'm gonna block you and I'm gonna delete your comment.
yeah. So
So
that's what you should do. Just ignore it.
yeah. But I feel like this movie takes the wanting to get revenge on those fat phobes like to another level. You shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have called her a pig.
Mm-hmm. Like, well, good for her moments.
Yes. But I
Like,
also think that this movie does a good job, is at least in the beginning, with like the social media thing. It's
mhm.
kind of subtle, but I think it's realistic of like what a teenage girl would do if someone posted something like that.
Yeah,
Like she's gonna internalize it and like not necessarily tell her parents about it and then be embarrassed and
yeah. It's embarrassing to talk about anyway. So
hmm
I feel like sometimes, parents didn't grow up with that, like the social media stuff, so it's hard for them
yeah.
to understand. And
They're
yeah,
like, just turn it off. And you're like, it's everywhere. Even if I turn it off, other people are still seeing it. Like,
yeah,
it's still out there.
yeah. It's a very prevalent part of people's lives now. So
Yeah.
just turn it off.
No, it's kind of not a thing anymore to just be like, just don't be online.
Yeah,
Like, everyone's online.
like dial up or something.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, is there any other parts that you found interesting that you want to talk about that I
Well,
didn't watch?
I mean, I think we covered most everything. The only thing I know, like when the movie first came out, I saw some things where like people were like rooting for her to like end up with the killer in the end,
She's
and like
16, first of
yeah,
all, and
and I was like,
second
well,
of all,
she's
no.
old and she's like a teenager, so
Yeah.
eh.
Oh,
But yeah, other than that, I'm just glad they didn't go that route.
yeah.
That would have, I think, just been
It would have
gross.
made it icky. Yeah, it
Yeah.
would. No.
Yeah.
That,
But yeah, it's definitely I wouldn't say it's like my favorite horror film, but it's definitely nice to like have some real representation in there for sure.
I was gonna say you get to see yourself and not as the bad guy.
Yeah.
So I feel
That's
like,
really good.
yeah, a lot of us um cling on to those roles, even if they're not necessarily the most positive. We're like, hey, they kind of look like me. I love
Hmm.
this now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
stuff
for
like
sure.
that. Is there any parts in the movie that you wish were different or that you didn't like?
I mean, honestly, like her family kind of sucks.
Yeah,
I hate saying that, but I don't know. I
I
just,
also think that that's a cultural thing.
yeah.
Like, I think she had like the traditional Hispanic family. The dad who's kind of in his own world, and the mom who is strict and
Hmm.
doesn't quite get it. So,
Old school.
yeah.
We're like, what happens like after all that? Like, I mean, at the end, like, there's like a male character that like she kind of like gets. I think he picks her up on like a motorcycle. It's like one of their friends from high school.
Hmm.
Um, so I was just wondering, like, hopefully, like, they're nice to her.
Yeah.
Like, and don't blame her, you know?
Hmm.
I guess we'll never know.
You never know. Is there anything else that you didn't like or would change?
Um, I mean, there's definitely parts that are like uncomfortable, but
Hmm.
I think like, and there's stuff that like I was like, well, that wasn't my experience, but just because it wasn't my experience doesn't mean wasn't somebody else's experience.
Yeah.
I mean, so
That's kind of how I feel with I feel like a lot of characters do this, even thin ones, with like the secret emotional eating.
oh yeah, the binge eating scenes.
Yes.
Yes,
And I'm
she has
like,
like that secret.
is that some people's experiences? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But like, I feel like it's portrayed so much in the media
Yeah,
that people automatically assume that that's what all fat people do.
yeah, it's definitely an overdone kind of trope, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That was something that I was like, ugh. I mean, some people can definitely relate to it, but
yeah,
it's not, yeah, it's not everyone's experience. So that was kind of,
yeah, that one kind of, they were just like, what do fat people do?
how do we explain why she's fat? Let's make her eat cake.
I'm like,
Sadly. So overall, do you think that this representation is positive or negative?
um, I mean, it's kind of like hard because it's the genre.
No,
It's
yeah.
like, in one way, I think it's positive because it's a fat final girl, and I've never seen
Mhm.
it before, so that's pretty cool. Um, so I say it's mostly positive, even though there are some things that are maybe not so great. But
Yeah. I agree it is hard because of the genre. You're like, yeah, it's positive. Also, all these things happen. Agree with you. I think just simply her being a fat final girl and the main character in the movie is positive. So I would say positive as well. Do you want to, before we like I do my outro, do you want to plug any like social media or projects or anything that you're working on?
well, I'm not really doing much right now. I'm going back to work for the first time in 2 years on Monday. But my husband's book comes out November 10th.
Ooh.
No, it's a horror novel called There Was a Knock, There Came a Knocking. I'm gonna butcher the title, There Came a Knocking. And it's loosely based off of, do you remember a couple years ago and like people were getting like clowns just randomly popping up, like following them, like that kind
Yes.
of so it's
Mm.
really good. So if you like
I will
horror,
support his book, but that's
yeah,
clowns are like one of my biggest fears, so I will not be reading it. But
it's
definitely go check that out.
it's
I'll
him
encourage.
by John Armicool III. Actually, I'm not sure if the third is on his name, but any of y'all ever seen
John Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all for this episode. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
me dealing with
And
my crazy
for,
schedule?
no, you're fine. And for recommending this movie, because it's definitely not one that I would have thought to do, because I had never heard of this movie before.
Yeah,
You were
I
like,
like watching weird stuff, so
but so you all can follow the podcast on TikTok at bbb.thepodcast and Instagram at bbb.podcast. I'll have information for upcoming episodes there and just general stuff. I also post inclusive size brands every Friday on the Instagram, and there's a highlight with it. You can also follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Carolina Howie. And yeah, I'll see you all next week. Until then, stay fat and fabulous. Bye.